I found my radiology program acceptance letter in a junk drawer between dead batteries and a cracked pack of rubber bands. That was the moment I understood my place in that house. Nobody yelled at me. Nobody tore it up. They just folded it small and slid it out of sight like it was clutter. I'm 58 now, but this started when I was 28, back in Cedar Run, Tennessee. One stoplight, one grocery store, a church parking lot that worked like a news station. If somebody sneezed on Sunday, half the town knew by Monday morning. In our house, my older sister Blythe wasn't just the favorite. She was the whole production. If she smiled at someone in the pew behind her, people talked about it like they'd witnessed a miracle. My mom, Lorraine, ran half the social life at First Baptist without ever holding a title. She handled the sign-up sheets, the prayer chain, the bake sale money. She knew who donated what and who didn't. She kept score, even when she said she didn't. My dad, Rex, was a retired county inspector. He could fix anything with a wrench and a level, but he hated conflict more than he loved being right. If voices started rising, he disappeared into the garage. While you're listening, share in the comments which country you're watching from. And let's continue. Growing up, I learned something early. Being steady doesn't get applause. Blythe got applause for breathing. I got noticed when something needed lifting, paying, or fixing. If the trash overflowed, I took it out. If a bill was short, I picked up hours. Nobody asked me to. It was just understood. The refrigerator at my parents' place looked like a Blythe museum. Pageant photos, employee spotlight printouts from whatever real estate office she worked at that year. Church group pictures with her planted dead center like she owned the frame. I taped my radiology program acceptance letter up once, right at eye level. I was proud of that letter, first in our family to get into a medical program. By the next morning, it was gone. I didn't confront anyone. I opened drawers until I found it folded tight in the kitchen junk pile. My mom stood at the sink while I held it up. "Oh, honey," she said without turning around. I just needed space for Blythe's new photo. That was it. No fight. No apology. By the time I finished school and started working at the county hospital, I had a habit. I handled problems quietly. I didn't ask for credit because asking felt like begging. I trained them to expect that from me, and I kept doing it, shift after shift, without saying a word. Late that winter, my mom called while I was halfway through a double at the hospital. I could hear wind pushing against their old windows through the phone. She didn't waste time on small talk. "The house is coming apart," she said. "There's a leak in the roof over the hallway, and the floor by the laundry room feels soft. Your dad says there are cracks along the back wall that weren't there before." I stepped into an empty supply room and shut the door. "How bad is it?" "It's bad enough that your father isn't sleeping," she answered. "We can't afford a full repair right now." Dad's pension was steady but small. Mom's church work came with influence, not income. They spent what they had keeping up appearances, donations, events, clothes that looked pressed and proper. Savings weren't built for emergencies. They were built for show. We had what Mom called a family meeting that Sunday at the kitchen table, the same table where my acceptance letter used to sit before it got folded into a drawer. Blythe wasn't there. She sent a text that Mom read out loud. "I have a showing and a client dinner," Mom said, holding up her phone. "She says we should do what we need to do." I looked at Dad. He stared at a crack running along the ceiling like it personally offended him. He didn't ask me for money. He didn't have to. The silence did the asking. I had been stacking overtime for years. Extra weekend shifts. Holidays nobody wanted. Living in a small apartment with secondhand furniture like it was a personality trait instead of a sacrifice. I had money saved because I never spent it on anything that didn't matter. I cleared my throat and said, "Get me an estimate." The contractor was Eldon Carver, local guy, mid-40s, serious about his work. His crew showed up when they said they would, which already put him above half the town. I met him at the house, walked him through every problem, took notes while he talked about roof decking, foundation reinforcement, plumbing lines that needed replacing. "It's going to be a big number," Eldon warned me. "Just tell me the truth," I said. The truth came out to $92,600 once he factored in what they'd find after opening walls. I didn't argue. I wired the money straight from my savings to his company. No contract, no promissory note, just family. I was the one Eldon called when decisions had to be made. I approved materials. I chose fixtures. I drove out every week after work, sometimes still in scrubs, walking through dust and exposed beams while Mom hovered and Dad watched quietly. When they pulled up old flooring, I stood there with a flashlight. When they reinforced the foundation, I watched the crew pour and level. Nobody else in that house was going to supervise it, so I did. Months later, the place looked stronger than it had in decades. New roof, solid floors, plumbing that didn't groan when you turned a faucet, fresh paint that covered years of wear. Mom stepped onto the porch one evening after Eldon packed up and started crying like it was the final scene of a movie. Dad gave me that quiet nod he saved for funerals and graduations. "This house will be yours someday," Mom said, gripping my arm. "You're the one who saved it." Dad looked at me and added, "That's right. We won't forget this." I stood there on that porch, dust still in the air, and believed them because I wanted to believe them. I reached out and shook my father's hand, sealing a deal that existed only in words. A few months later, after the dust from the renovation had settled, a spring storm rolled through Cedar Run and ripped a strip of trim clean off the back porch. My mom called like the house was collapsing again. "There's wood hanging down, and I can see daylight where I shouldn't," she said. "After everything you did, I can't let it start falling apart again." I told her I'd handle it. I called around and found a carpenter who specialized in restoration work. Her name was Marin Kittredge. I expected a gruff, older guy. Instead, a woman in worn jeans and work boots pulled into the driveway with a dented pickup and a beat-up red toolbox sliding around in the bed. She walked the porch without small talk, ran her hand along the exposed edge and said, "They used the right materials. The storm just caught it wrong. I'll secure it and reinforce this corner so it doesn't happen again. No drama, no blame, just facts." While she worked, she measured twice before cutting once. She didn't fill silence with chatter. When she finished, she showed me exactly what she'd done and wrote everything down on a carbon copy invoice. "If something shifts, call me," she said. But it shouldn't. We ended up sitting on my tailgate afterward, drinking gas station coffee out of thin paper cups. We didn't force conversation. We just sat there watching the light fade behind the trees. "You're the one who paid for all this work, aren't you?" she asked finally. "Yeah," I said. "It needed to be done." She nodded once like she understood more than I'd said. It was the first time in a long time I felt relaxed around another adult. No performance, no scorekeeping. We started seeing each other after that. Nothing flashy. We grabbed dinner at a diner off Highway 17. We worked on small projects together. She'd point at something and say, "Cheap fixes always cost more later. Do it right the first time." I liked that about her. She didn't cut corners, and she didn't pretend not to see them. By the next spring, She didn't feel like someone I was casually dating. She felt like the person my life was starting to line up with. Calm where I was tense. Direct where I'd been trained to stay quiet. The first time I brought her to my parents' place for dinner, my mom's smile tightened the second she saw her step out of the truck. "Well," Mom said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "And what exactly do you do, Marin?" "I run my own restoration business," Marin answered evenly. "Mostly structural repairs and older homes." Blythe was suddenly in town by coincidence. She hugged Marin like they were lifelong friends and said, "I've heard so much about you," in that sweet tone she used when she was sizing someone up. Later that night, I stepped into the hallway and heard Blythe's voice low in the kitchen. "I'm just concerned," she said. "He's always been easy to pull into things. I didn't walk in, I let it sit." When I went to grab a box from my old room before we left, I stopped cold. The walls were a different color. New bedding, decorative signs on the dresser like it was staged for pictures. I found Mom in the living room. "What happened to my room?" She didn't blink. "Blythe needs a place when she visits. You don't live here." Like the years I did live there didn't count for anything. I walked to the garage and found a plastic bin shoved behind paint cans. My high school yearbooks were bent at the corners. Old photos curled at the edges. My acceptance letter sat folded again, creased like it had been handled too many times. I carried the bin to my truck without saying another word. When I got back to my place, I set it on the kitchen table and told Marin everything. I told her I'd paid for a house I didn't legally own. I told her my family had a long habit of treating my life like spare parts. And then I waited to see what she would say. Marin didn't hesitate that night. She listened without interrupting, then said, "If you paid for structural work on a house that isn't legally yours, that's not small. That's leverage, whether they admit it or not." Her voice stayed calm, but her eyes sharpened. That was the first time I realized she didn't just fix wood and brick. She studied weak spots. More than a year of steady days passed before I proposed. No fireworks, no audience. Just a quiet morning in my kitchen with 2 mugs of coffee and a ring I'd saved for by picking up extra shifts. I started talking, hands sweating, and she said yes before I finished the second sentence. "I'm not waiting for the fine print," she said, smiling. "I'm in." For the first time in my life, I felt like I could exhale all the way. I called my mom that afternoon. There was a pause on the line after I told her. "Well," she finally said, "congratulations." Her tone sounded rehearsed, like she was reading from a church bulletin. Dad got on for a second and said, "That's big news, son." But even he sounded like he was standing too close to someone else while he spoke. A week later, Blythe was suddenly back in town. My mom's social media lit up with pictures. Brunch at the cafe, shopping bags on Main Street, smiling shots outside church, captions about family time and blessings. I wasn't in any of them. It was like I'd already moved away. That's when Mavis Rundle called me from the post office. "I'm not trying to stir trouble," she said, lowering her voice even though I knew she was probably alone. "But you need to know what's being said." I leaned against my truck in the hospital parking lot and listened. "Your sister has been telling people she's worried," Mavis continued. "She says this Marin woman is after the family house and that you've been isolated. She makes it sound like she's protecting you." My face went hot. "Isolated from who?" "She says you've changed," Mavis replied. "That you're not yourself. In Cedar Run, that kind of concern moves fast and sticks. Beauty shop, Sunday school, the hardware store. By the end of the week, people repeat it like it's their own thought." 2 days later, Mom called me directly. "I've been thinking. she began, voice cool. Maybe the house should go to Blythe for stability. She's in real estate, it makes sense. I went still. You told me that house would be mine. That money was a gift, she said quickly. You shouldn't make it awkward. I reminded her exactly what she'd said on the porch, word for word. She didn't argue the memory. Promises change, she replied, like she was talking about rain. Later that night, Dad called me separately. His voice was low. Maybe it's better to let this go, he said. Peace matters, peace, that word again, always at my expense. Around that time, Keely Voss started forwarding me screenshots. Church ladies posting vague quotes about outsiders who smile while they plot. Comments about protecting family from outside influence. None of them used names, but they didn't have to. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't post back. I didn't defend myself in public. I just started paying attention. The shift wasn't random. It felt organized, like somebody was laying track in front of a train that hadn't arrived yet. 3 weeks before the wedding, I drove out to my parents' place to grab the last of my things from the garage. Blythe's white SUV was parked crooked near the porch. For a second, I thought about turning around and coming back later. Then I got tired of rearranging my life around hers and killed the engine. The garage smelled like motor oil and old paint. I was stacking a box into the bed of my truck when I heard Blythe's voice upstairs, loud and loose. She was on FaceTime, laughing like nothing in the world touched her. Then I heard my name. I froze without meaning to. Once it's clean in my name, I'm listing it immediately, she said. It'll move fast. 470,000 easy, maybe more. We split it and we're done. There was a man's voice through the speaker, tinny and amused. Later I learned it was Carter Keene, but at that moment he was just the guy she was planning a payday with. She kept going. I told Mom and Dad that Marin's using him for the property. I said she's isolating him and pushing him to claim it. They ate it up. He's predictable. My hands started shaking so hard I had to set the box down. I wanted to storm up those stairs and drag the truth into the open. Instead, I stood there in the dark garage and listened until I couldn't stand another word. Then I walked out, got in my truck, and drove home. Marin was at the kitchen counter when I came in, measuring something for a cabinet shelf we were installing. She looked up once and knew it wasn't small. Tell me exactly what you heard, she said. I repeated it word for word, the amount, the plan to get the house clean in her name, the part about turning my parents against us. I didn't add drama. I didn't leave anything out. Marin didn't interrupt. When I finished, she nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Facts first, feelings later. 2 days after that, I stopped by my parents without calling ahead. I told myself it was to drop off a casserole dish Mom had left at my place, but I knew I was checking the temperature of the room. I walked in through the side door and saw papers spread across the kitchen table. My mom's hand snapped over one page when she noticed me. I caught one word before she covered it completely. Quitclaim. What's that? I asked evenly. Just paperwork, she replied too fast. You don't need to worry about it. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Check the old glove box in my truck. Please don't mention me. I drove back under the excuse of grabbing a tool I'd left behind. His truck was unlocked. Inside the glove box, under a stack of insurance cards, was a folded photocopy of a draft quitclaim deed. It transferred the house fully to Blythe. No mention of me. No acknowledgement of the money. I took a picture and put it back exactly where it had been. Marin didn't let me react. She built a folder on her laptop and started scanning everything. Bank transfer records showing 92,600 wired to Eldon's company. Invoices, before and after photos. Emails from Mom thanking me for saving the house. Texts where she'd called it an investment in our future before switching to gift. "We don't win with volume," Marin kept saying. "We win with proof." Blythe didn't stop there. Keely forwarded me a voicemail Blythe had left with the hospital switchboard. She'd hinted I was financially unstable and possibly under investigation. HR called me in. I sat across from them, steady and quiet, and laid out my bank statements and performance reviews. "If there's a question about my stability," I said, "you can check my record." The rumor died in that office. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't just family tension. It was coordinated. Social pressure, legal paperwork, reputation hits, all of it aimed at one outcome. They wanted me embarrassed, isolated, and tired enough to sign away my own money. Once I understood it was a squeeze, I stopped reacting and started building. We paid for our wedding ourselves. Small barn venue outside Cedar Run, string lights, simple food from a local caterer who didn't charge extra for breathing. Nothing fancy, nothing borrowed. My parents didn't offer a dime. They offered opinions about seating charts and then went quiet when invoices came due. Marin met with the DJ one afternoon while I was at work. When I got home, she had notes spread across the kitchen table. "What kind of projector does he run?" she muttered to herself. "HDMI input, backup USB slot, ceiling mount, or portable stand?" I leaned against the counter. "Why do you care about his cables?" She didn't look up. "Because I don't like depending on one option." She asked the DJ where the laptop would sit, how the screen lowered, and what would happen if Wi-Fi dropped. She wrote it all down like she was pricing lumber for a job. She never said what she was planning, but I could see the frame going up. I met with Eldon Carver at his office and told him I needed copies of everything. Every invoice, every change order, every text where my parents approved work or thanked me for handling it. He didn't blink. "I keep my records," he said, sliding a thick folder across the desk. "I don't get in the middle of family business, but records don't change their story." Next stop was Hollis Pryor, a real estate attorney in the next county. His office smelled like old books and strong coffee. He flipped through our documents slowly, glasses low on his nose. "If they keep the benefit of your money and you get nothing," he said, "that's unjust enrichment." I let that phrase settle. It sounded clinical, clean, like a way to name what had been eating at me. Hollis tapped the folder. "The cleanest path is simple. Document the money, document the improvements, document the promise, and document their sudden need to call it a gift." Marin nodded like she was reviewing a blueprint. "No emotion in the file," she said. "Just facts." Meanwhile, Mavis kept feeding us town chatter. Screenshots of posts, text threads where people speculated about my behavior. Keely forwarded anything Blythe wrote that contradicted something she'd said earlier. We didn't comment on any of it. We just saved it. Then one evening, Keely sent me a photo Mavis had taken at the post office. 2 certified mail envelopes addressed to my parents from a local credit union. The return address line said real estate lending. Both had gone out the same week. That night, I called Dad and didn't dance around it. "Are you applying for something against the house?" I asked. He went quiet long enough that I thought he'd hung up. Then he spoke fast and low. "Your mother started a home equity line of credit application. The lender wants proof there are no outside claims on the title." Outside claims. That was me. They asked for confirmation. "The repair money was a gift," he added. "They don't want disputes." The so-called gift acknowledgement finally made sense. This wasn't about peace. It was about clearing the path for a bank. Marin built a slide presentation the way she built a job binder. Timeline first, then my bank transfers showing 92,600 wired to Eldon's company. Invoices matched to dates, before and after photos. Text messages from Mom thanking me for saving the house. The draft quitclaim deed Dad had slipped me. Then she did something I didn't even know you could do. She photographed the gift document Blythe had shown around and pulled the metadata. Creation date, edit history. Timestamps that proved it wasn't some old understanding finally put on paper. It was new, strategic. "We don't argue," she said, clicking save. "We show." And we kept building. Our wedding day landed on a warm Saturday in late May the following year. The air smelled like cut grass and barbecue smoke drifting from somewhere down the road. We had around 160 guests packed into that barn. Co-workers from the hospital, neighbors, a few cousins who didn't pick sides, and friends who actually showed up when it counted. I stood in a small side room near the feed bins, straightening my tie in a mirror that warped my shoulders. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I had done harder things than say vows. Keely pushed the door open without knocking. Her face was neutral in a way that made my stomach tighten. "You need to look outside," she said. I stepped to the window. My parents' car rolled into the gravel lot slow and deliberate. Mom stepped out first in a long black dress that brushed her ankles. Dad followed in a black suit I'd only seen at funerals. Blythe came around the other side wearing black like she was headed to a memorial service instead of her brother's wedding. People in the parking lot paused mid-conversation. A couple of my co-workers glanced at each other like they'd just witnessed a wreck they couldn't unsee. Keely crossed her arms. "Do you want me to lock the doors and keep this contained?" For a second, I almost said yes. I pictured the story my mom would tell for the next decade about being barred from her son's wedding. I let that image burn out. "No," I said. "Let them walk in." They took the front row without speaking to anyone. Black fabric against spring flowers and pale dresses. You could feel the room trying to decide if it was rude to notice. Marin stood near the entrance, calm as ever. Was simple. No dramatic readings. No was simple. No dramatic readings. No drawn-out speeches. When Marin walked down the aisle, I forgot to breathe for a second. She looked grounded, like the center of something solid. Being near her felt like stepping onto level ground after years of tilt. When it was my turn to speak, I followed the script for a bit. Then I went off it. "I will protect what we build," I said clearly. I didn't turn toward my family, but I felt my mom stiffen in the front row. That promise wasn't poetry. It was a boundary I meant to keep. We kissed. Most of the barn stood up cheering. My parents stayed seated. Blythe gave a small smile like she had a card up her sleeve and was just waiting for the right moment to play it. While guests moved toward the reception tables, Marin slipped behind the DJ booth. She checked the projector, confirmed the HDMI connection, and tested the USB backup. I saw her lean in and tell the DJ something firm. "No open mic," she said. "Only the names on the list." He nodded. The lights dimmed slightly as the first dance music queued up. My family sat in black at the edge of the room, quiet and watchful. And I could feel something building, like everything that had been stacking up for months finally stepping into the room. It didn't take long. The reception started normal enough. We did the first dance under string lights. People lined up for barbecue and sweet tea. Laughter bounced off the barn walls. For about 30 minutes, I almost convinced myself my family would sit there in black and sulk quietly until it was over. Then the DJ tapped the microphone and said it was time for toasts. Before he could call a name from the list, my mom stood up and walked straight to him. She didn't ask. She didn't hesitate. She took the microphone like it belonged to her. The barn went silent in a way I had never heard before. Lorraine squared her shoulders and faced the crowd. "We are here today in mourning," she began, her voice smooth and practiced like she was leading a prayer circle. "Our son is being taken from this family by a woman who wants what does not belong to her." A ripple moved through the tables. "She has caused division," Mom continued. "She has put ideas in his head about property and entitlement. We raised him better than this." My jaw tightened, but I didn't stand. I didn't argue. Blythe stepped forward from the front row like this had been rehearsed. She placed a single sheet of paper and a pen on the table in front of me. "It doesn't have to be dramatic," she said softly, leaning close. "Just sign it and stop making this ugly." At the top of the page, bold and clean, were the words, "Acknowledgement of gift." It stated that my $92,600 had been a voluntary gift with no conditions attached. Every eye in that barn was on me. My face went hot, but I kept my hands flat on the table. Marin had said the whole point was to stay steady, so I did nothing. I let the silence stretch. Marin moved before I did. She walked calmly to the DJ booth and held out her hand. "Remote, please," she said. The DJ hesitated half a second, then gave it to her. The projector screen behind us had been cycling through wedding photos. Marin clicked once, and the first slide replaced them. A screenshot of my bank transfer history filled the screen. The line showing $92,600 wired to Eldon Carver's company was highlighted. The memo line clearly named my parents' address. The room made a low, uneasy sound. Marin clicked again. Eldon's invoices appeared, material lists, dates, before and after photos of the roof, the foundation, the plumbing lines. Emails from my mom saying, "Thank you for saving the house, and we couldn't have done this without you." My mother's face went pale. Another click. Screenshots of Blythe's messages popped up, forwarded through Keeley. There she was, bragging about how she'd painted Marin as a gold digger, talking about getting the house clean in her name and listing it immediately. Carter Keene's name sat right there in the thread. Murmurs grew louder. Marin didn't rush. She clicked to the next slide. A photo of the so-called gift document in Blythe's hand a full week before the wedding. Then the metadata screen showing when the file had been created and edited. Dates that proved it wasn't some old misunderstanding being clarified. It had been drafted days earlier. "This was prepared in advance," Marin said evenly, "not as a courtesy, as leverage." The barn had gone from shocked quiet to a hum of disbelief. Then came the final slide. A screenshot of an email from a local credit union's real estate lending department. Private account numbers were blacked out, but the message was clear. My mom had started a home equity line of credit application. The lender needed written confirmation that my repair money was a gift to avoid a title dispute. In other words, they weren't grieving, they were clearing obstacles. Aunt Althea Marr stood up from her table near the dance floor. She didn't ask for a microphone. "Y'all tried to rob him at his own wedding," she said, loud and sharp. Nobody shushed her, not one person. Blythe grabbed her purse and headed for the exit. Mom opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Dad stood there stiff, eyes moving between the screen and the floor, like he was finally seeing the whole thing from the outside. He stepped toward Mom, took her by the elbow, and guided her out without a word. The barn doors swung closed behind them. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then Maren set the remote down, walked back to our table, and sat beside me. She faced the guests, her voice steady. "Sorry about that," she said. "Please eat." And the entire room exhaled, all at once. The next morning, while most of Cedar Run was still replaying wedding drama over coffee, Maren and I sat across from Hollis Pryor. I was still in yesterday's suit pants and a clean shirt. Maren had her laptop open and the full slide deck printed and tabbed. Hollis flipped through the folder once, slow and methodical. He gave a short nod. "This is organized," he said. "That's rare." He didn't waste time on sympathy. He started outlining strategy. Timeline first, money trail second, promise third. Draft quitclaim deed as proof of intent, and that so-called gift acknowledgement as evidence that nobody calls something a gift unless they're afraid it isn't one. Hollis filed an unjust enrichment claim before lunch. He attached the bank transfer showing $92,600 wired to Eldon's company. He included invoices, emails, the draft deed, and a note pointing out that the sudden need for written gift confirmation lined up exactly with a lending application. "Documents don't debate," Hollis said. "They just sit there and wait." Notices went out by certified mail that afternoon. For the first time in months, I didn't have to debate my own mother. I didn't have to correct my sister. I didn't have to defend my wife. The documents spoke in plain English. Hollis also flagged the lender angle. If my mom was trying to leverage the house for a home equity line of credit while pretending my money didn't exist, that created pressure she couldn't smooth over with church language. Banks care about claims. Banks care about risk. Within 2 weeks, the noise stopped. No more messages sent through cousins. No more "we're worried about you" calls from church friends. Blythe stopped texting casual check-ins like nothing had happened. The silence told me Hollis had hit both lanes that mattered in Cedar Run: money and reputation. The settlement came through without a courtroom show. $92,600 repaid over 32 months. A lien recorded against the house until the final payment cleared. Clean, documented, enforceable. I didn't get the house. I got my money back and my name removed from their board. After that, information came the way it always does in a small town. Secondhand and sideways. Keely told me Mom stopped showing up at First Baptist for a while. When she finally came back, she didn't sit in her usual front section. She took a seat near the back and left before the closing hymn. Nobody rushed over to her like they used to. Mavis sent me a screenshot from the realty boutique where Blythe worked. Prue Latham had posted a short statement about upholding professional ethics. Prue had been at the wedding. She had seen the slides with her own eyes. According to Mavis, Prue told Blythe, "Reputation is the product. You damaged it." Blythe was out. Carter Keene disappeared the minute the plan collapsed. That part I heard through Keely and 2 other people who never cared much for me. Even they said it was low. The only message that mattered came late one night from Dad. I should have stopped it earlier. I'm sorry. No excuses. No blaming Maren. No hiding behind peace. Just a small, late truth sitting on my phone screen. I read it twice, set the phone down, and let it be what it was. A few months later, Maren and I closed on a rough little place just outside town. 2 bedrooms, old wood floors that creaked under every step, a porch that sagged on the left side. The yard looked like it had given up somewhere around the last drought. We didn't pick it because it impressed anybody. We picked it because it was ours. The down payment came from our savings and the first settlement checks. Watching that money move from their debt back into our account and straight into that house felt clean. It felt like something closing properly. Marin ran the renovation like she ran everything else. Calm, structured, focused. She taped up lists on the fridge, labeled bins in the hallway, tracked receipts in a spreadsheet. When a board needed replacing, she replaced it right. When wiring looked questionable, she rewired it instead of patching around it. "Do it once," she'd say, handing me a drill. "Do it right." I worked nights at the hospital and spent weekends sanding floors, reinforcing joists, repainting walls. For once, my quiet work built something that belonged to me. It wasn't covering somebody else's cracks. It was building our frame. Keely showed up with takeout one Friday night and leaned against the counter, looking around. "This place is solid where it counts," she said, "and no black dresses in sight." Mavis dropped off a welcome home card like she was delivering certified mail. She winked when she handed it to Marin and said, "I prefer good news." Nobody asked about my parents directly, but everyone in Cedar Run knew what those black outfits had meant. The story didn't need retelling. Dad started calling every other Sunday. The conversations were short and awkward, but steady. "How's the porch coming along?" he'd ask. "You still picking up extra shifts?" He always asked about Marin before hanging up. "Tell her I said hello," he'd add, like he was testing how much ground he was allowed to step on. I didn't punish him for being late to Courage. I just answered. Mom never called to apologize. The only message that reached me came through a cousin about me being influenced. I didn't respond. I was done defending my own mind. On my birthday, a card showed up in the mailbox with Dad's handwriting on the front. Inside, it said, "Proud of you." Nothing else. I stood in the kitchen holding that card longer than I expected to. Then I walked to the refrigerator and taped it dead center, right at eye level. No calendar covering it, no competing photos, just my name where I could see it every morning. That Thanksgiving, Dad came by for about an hour with a store-bought pie in a plastic container. He stood on the porch like he wasn't sure he was welcome. "You got room for one more at the table?" he asked. "We do," I said, and opened the door wider. He ate, listened more than he talked, and hugged me tight before he left. I didn't call it forgiveness. I called it a door. "Hold up. Can I ask you something before you scroll? If you've got the hype button, tap it to boost this video and help it reach more people. Then please subscribe and hit like, because it really matters, and it's one click. Now tell me in the comments, when family tries to guilt you into signing away what you earned, do you shut the door for good or fight back and set hard rules?